Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Military Mutterings, and we've got a mighty treat for you all today. So, as I, Jack Fletcher, and my good friend,
Me, Kevin Jansen,
introduce this video, you can all see the title card being the CVRT family, the Versatile family. Now Kevin, could you just read what CVRT stands for?
well, Combat Vehicle Reconnaissance Tract. Everybody who can read can see that.
Indeed. Now, the point of this family of vehicles was to replace the Alvis Paladin, and they needed a new lightweight armored vehicle. So why have one when you can have almost a dozen?
Yes.
So,
Also, can I just say, what I like about the name is we actually do the exact same thing. we describe a role of a vehicle by just spelling it out. Then when you name the vehicle, you just take the first letter of each word. I like that. It's simple, it works, and everybody knows what you're talking about. Exactly.
Right, so for our first little part here, we have the FB101 Scorpion and Scorpion 90. Now, the Scorpion itself is armed with a 76mm gun, and is actually the one on the bottom. This vehicle entered service in 1972, and, well, has lower ground pressure than a human foot. And the Scorpion 2, which is armed with the 19mm cannon found on the panhards, etc., was known as either the Scorpion 90 or the Scorpion 2. And that was an export vehicle. Now, an interesting thing about the Scorpion is that it was Action Man. Yes, Action Man was a brand of toys in the United Kingdom, and the Scorpion was his vehicle. So now, if we...
That is interesting. But I always find it interesting that most nations make upgunned versions of their own vehicles, but then they end up only being export. I always find it kind of funny. It's like how this comes to show that at the point that they made the 90mm gun, they would have probably had something to replace theirs already, and they were just trying to get something going for the export market, just keep the family going a little bit longer and earning some more money.
Well, what I will say is that at the bottom picture we have the standard Scorpion.
Mm-hmm.
But next to it is another member of the CVRT family, but we'll get into that later.
It seems to be missing a rear, unless the rear got replaced by a dude with a hat. I don't think that's
bold of you to assume that it requires its rear.
Yes.
And here we have FB102 Striker. Now, this is using the chassis of the the Spartan, which is the main personnel carrier. Now, this vehicle was introduced in 1996 and can carry a 5-round launcher box on the top of the hull, and it can, of course, fire the BAE Swingfire wire-guided missiles. And not only that, but it had an additional reload inside the hull, so you could fire 10 missiles from this thing. What is also rather interesting is that the Striker is not at all related to another of the armor personnel carrier vehicles that we converted to anti-tank guided missile carriers, which would be the Swingfire, standard Swingfire.
Yeah, like I was actually going to bring that one up. I was going to bring that one up and actually ask you if the Swingfire was related to this family as well, but it's not then.
No, it is on the chassis of the FB432 Bulldog, which I have actually driven, and is incredibly easy to drive.
How have I not known this fact yet? That's interesting.
Yes. Right, well, if we get into our next vehicle, this
Oh, that was the vehicle on the background on the first one.
No.
Oh my lord.
Not the vehicle.
There's so many of these vehicles, that's the thing.
Indeed.
And I'm not British, so I don't know them.
That is the Spartan, and the Spartan, introduced in 1977, armoured personnel carrier with the capacity of 5 soldiers and crew. Now, 5 soldiers is too small for a standard British section. Oh, at this time anyway, I don't know about nowadays. So it was mainly used for carrying specialists like anti-tank missile teams or mortar-fire controllers. And what I will say to anyone wondering what today's source is, although it will of course be in the description, the primary source for this video is the Bovington Tank Museum's own The Tank, the definitive visual history of armored vehicles. Spectacular book, very reliable.
I think we've mentioned the book before, and I still need to buy it. That's the problem.
Indeed. Anyway, if we get on to our next our next.
Now this is a looker, isn't it?
The Samaritan. Now, the FB104 Samaritan, introduced in 1978, as you can see, is an armoured ambulance, and it allows for 3 stretchers, or I believe as well 3 seated casualties, as well as medical personnel. So, yes, what?
Well, very simple. Just You don't see ambulance versions of vehicles that often, because usually they're just cars. But it's interesting to see an actual vehicle
Armored.
of this family. Yeah, like an actual front line sort of medic thing.
Well,
And remember, it's got the crosses on the sides. So if you're on the other side of the team, don't shoot them. Don't shoot the
unless you're at war with Switzerland.
Yes, then very much shoot them.
Anyway, if we go on to our next vehicle, the FB105 Sultan. Now, the Sultan is a command vehicle, and it was introduced in 1977. And not only was it used by units that were not equipped with the other CVRT variants, but it was also able to provide enough room for a map and a desk, as well as space for multiple radios, as well as a tent that could be attached to the rear to provide more space for the commanders. So what you've got here essentially is a rather roomy, mobile command post on a very reliable, very fat chassis.
I take it probably doesn't have any weapons on board, or just like a machine gun.
Well, yeah, just your standard general purpose machine gun is what I would assume that it would have. Same with all of the other variants of this vehicle. I mean, if you even the Samaritan had a cupola with a machine gun.
Yeah, but like sometimes certain command vehicles tend to have like still some sort of a proper weapon on board, but this is just dedicated command vehicle.
Yeah, just standard dedicated command vehicle. Anyway, as we go on to our next vehicle, they thought of everything.
Oh, Lord.
FB106 Samson, which was introduced in 1978, is a repair and recovery vehicle made specifically for the CVRT family. Not only can it do command and recovery, but it can be outfitted with towing equipment, an A-frame for the crane, earth anchor to secure the vehicle, or smaller tools and equipment for its career fitters. Now again, this was primarily used for recovery and repair of other members of the CVRT family. So again, as I just mentioned, they thought of everything with this. You've got your ambulance, you've got your command vehicle, your standard armor personnel carrier, your recovery vehicle, on very similar chassis.
You know, this recovery vehicle, so it's mainly to recover other vehicles of this family, right?
Indeed.
It kind of just reminds me of what the Germans had in World War II. Like, what should we use to tow out tigers? So I know, not a tiger. So you just have a recovery version of a tiger. And then same here.
Well, yes, well, considering there are so many different varieties of this family, it only makes sense, really.
I mean, I take it this one has a crane looking at the background on the photo. I think it's like two little beams.
Can be outfitted with the A-frame for the crane.
Yeah.
Nice. Anyway, let us get on to FB107. This is an interesting vehicle. Scimitar and Scimitar Mark. Now, Scimitar, despite being FB107, was introduced into service in 1990. So it was
1990
was actually 1994. So it was actually the second of the CVRT family to see service. And it was armed with the 30mm Radin cannon that I believe was used on the Warrior and the Fox on the car. We'll get into the Fox in a bit, because whilst it isn't a CVRT member, there was a variant with turret, and we'll come to that in a minute. But so Scimitar, very fast and nimble, rather agile, good, 30mm gun. But then in 2010 comes Scimitar 2, because of the threat of IEDs and just the vehicle generally starting to be a bit outdated. they took the Sultan chassis, or the hull of the Sultan, and put the turret of the, I believe it was the same turret or an enlarged turret, the Scimitar on top to make Scimitar Mark II. Again, this was in 2010. As you can see from the images, it has bar armor to protect against IEDs and RPGs and all that jazz. And not only that, but it featured a more powerful engine, the Cummins BTA diesel 235 horsepower, more upgraded suspension, and also add-on mine protection. As well, of course, there was also the threat of mines, of course, that being one of the many varieties of IED. So this vehicle, as you can see at the top, goes from rather small and nimble to rather large yet still nimble, a rather formidable beast of the battlefield.
But the gun it has, the Rodden, that's the low fire rate, right? It's not fully automatic, is it?
No, it does have a rather low fire rate compared to other...
For IFV standards, yeah.
And AFVs, yes. However, for this vehicle, it's certainly rather adequate.
Oh yeah, more than enough. Anything helps, really.
Yes.
With proper AP shells, it'll be just fine.
And if we go down to our next vehicle, the Sabre. Now, I couldn't find the FV rating for this vehicle, or the FV number, but what the Sabre is essentially is the Scorpion chassis with the turret of the Fox armored car. Now, the Fox armored car is a member of the CVR family, so CVRT is Combat Vehicle Reconnaissance Track. Fox is CVRW, so Combat Vehicle Reconnaissance Wheeled. And the reason why it's not featured is because it has all of its own different variants, we'll get to in another video. But this is the turret of the, as I said before, the turret of the Fox on a Scorpion chassis, armed with the same 30mm L27A1 Radon cannon. Now, what's interesting here is that although it was introduced in 1995, it only saw 9 years of service, because although 136 were built, it wasn't actually all that good, realistically speaking. I mean, it was just a cheaper way to build a Scimitar, but it was just rather unpopular. And as we could see from the fact that this vehicle only had 9 years of service, and Scimitar had decades of service, even going up to Scimitar 2, you can tell that this was one of the few variants of the vehicle that was not successful. So remember, everyone, cheaper doesn't mean better.
Unless you're talking export market, but I take it this one was not really exported that much.
I don't believe so, no.
No, it's a real shame.
Who in their right mind would get this when they could just get a Scimitar?
Yeah. Oh well.
Right. So, here we have our last slide. And here's 5 main variants of the FB4333 Alvis Stormer, which was introduced in 1991. Now, so going left to right, top to bottom, we have the...
I believe the first one is the air defense.
Yes, the Stormer air defense, which was armed with a dual Stinger launcher, as well as either a 25mm or 30mm rotary cannon. Only a singular prototype of this was built. The Stormer 30, which was more of an IFV prototype with a 30mm Bushmaster 2 and a tow launcher. The Stormer HVM, which is still in use, I believe, which carries Starstreak missiles, which you have 8 in the launcher, and I believe there are 8 in the hull. So you've got 8 ready to go and 1 reload. And then you have the Stormer flatbed, which is the image that, which is, I believe, the vehicle that we saw on the Scorpion slide. This was used to carry the Shielder mine-laying system. And fun fact, the tank you see in Rogue One, Star Wars film Rogue One, was based on this chassis.
Oh yeah, now that you mention it, I can see it, yeah. That's funny.
More you know. And finally, we have the standard armor personnel carrier of the Stormer itself. Now, I don't know whether it was either able to carry 8 soldiers and 2 crew members or 12 soldiers and crew members. I do not know this. I do not know how many soldiers it could carry as a result, so I'm not going to pretend I do know. However, I have heard numbers ranging between 8 to 12 soldiers and 2 crew, as I've stated beforehand. But what we have just gone through here, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, mutterers of all ages, is the entire, well, a portion, I suppose, if you count all the little prototypes here and there, of the entire CVRT family. Now,
and
this
we've let Jack do most of the talking here because he was very excited to cover this actually.
I've got the primary source right next to me, and I have been itching to cover my favorite family of vehicles for a long, long time. So I indeed may have stole the show this time.
Also,
however,
can I just say,
yes,
like looking at the vehicle, the second from the left, the IF, like the 30mm version, that looks more like a proper light tank than an actual IFV at this point.
Reminds me of the Dardo in a way. So while the
just
turret's so
smaller.
angular.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, do you have any final comment before we sign off for the week?
Not really. I mean, this was sort of... I guess this video was a bit different than usual, because we sort of just only cover one vehicle, then go in great detail, but now we covered a lot of vehicles in less detail, so... It's something different this week.
Yeah.
But there's just so many.
Indeed, to say, it's rather than one vehicle, an entire family.
Ah.
So, without further ado, that was this week's episode of Military Mutterings, and join us next week as we discuss a naval vessel of some variety.
I believe it was a whole class of ships that we're going to do next week.
It was actually, yes.
Nice.
However, I think it's smaller than the CVRT family.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yes. So, without further ado, unless Kevin has any final words to say?
Nope, I'm all good.
Well, until next week, friends. Tally-ho!
See ya.